through more of that background noise. What kind of question was that? Ambassador Neal did not build the ship, and she knew next to nothing about spaceship engineering, though that alien vessel was very exotic in design from what she had seen on her approach. Curves and fluid, round shapes dominated its form, that had the silhouette of an elongated disc with bulbous extrusions on the flat areas. There was no way of telling which was front or back, no breaks in the surface for engine outlets, windows, lights, or sensors. It looked more like an art piece than a spaceship, and the insides had not been any different. The corridor that had led her from the docking area to this room was unbroken as well. Walking through it, she had taken in the soft, off-white color of the floor that transitioned fluently up the curved walls, into a dark gray on the ceiling that had a soft, wavy structure. Though it was pleasantly bright, there was no visible lighting source, or anything else besides the bare surfaces. The smaller human exploration vessel looked embarrassingly clunky in comparison. Was that what did the alien being want to express? The ship was built along well-established design principles. It is a functional vessel made for long-distance exploration. May I ask a name with which I can address you? It lifted one of its 4 smaller arms to point at her, again in a very slow motion. The translator sprung into action after it was finished. This object, 2 objects, they are exactly the same. It took her a moment to gather what it was probably talking about. On her white, all-purpose pressure suit were shoulder ribbons, old-style ones made from a textile weave, adorned with brightly dyed yarn to form several differently colored stripes. And they were symmetrical. Maybe this was something light to talk about, so she took them off and laid them onto her forearm, side by side. These are insignias that indicate my function as an ambassador. All humans in official functions carry clear identifying markers with them, though these are also ceremonial, and their design dates back far into our history. It still was pointing, and the strong gaze was unbroken. How did you build it? The insignias? Exactly the same? It took her a moment to form a reply. I don't know how they are made. I think there is. How? Do you? Not know. The translator spoke louder than before. Maybe it only seemed louder, because the being had leaned markedly closer to the glass. Ambassador Neal shifted on the stool. This was not at all how it was supposed to go. She had no idea what the alien was going on about. Maybe it was not a representative of their species. Maybe this was an interrogation. Or maybe they just made a big mistake trying to do a face-to-face meeting this early after the first communications. This meeting was going badly, and she was flustered, which she was luckily able to hide. At least Nyarlathotep hoped that she was. First, that human had been even smaller than she had planned for, the little thing now awkwardly sitting on the pedestal for the translator. And then, Nyar's light-hearted, curious question seemed to completely fail to break the ice. But it truly was strange. The human was strikingly beautiful, and their ship was decidedly not. It was a pointy wedge that aggressively rejected the flow of space and the physical forces therein. Of course, the last thing had shocked her the most. The human apparently did not know how these adornments they were wearing themselves were made. Still, Nyar had to admit they were magnificently built, exactly the same down to every measurement she could discern. Maybe it was different for hive minds, with that piece of shared knowledge at the moment unavailable to this human? Nyar thought up some pleasant diplomatic words of the human language and formed the thought at the translator. I just want to restate that the insignias are beautiful and well made. Please excuse my curiosity on their construction. I did not want to overstep. Perhaps you can help me understand your fascinating biology more instead. I would like to know about your means of communication through a shared consciousness. How are you able to connect to each other over stellar distances? Then she waited for the translator to create those air vibrations that were the human's way of exchanging information over small distances. quite efficient, too, as it needed next to no energy and simultaneously worked between great numbers of individuals. Though it was a bit simpler than just transmitting thoughts, and so likely offered less bandwidth for substance, the translated reply was overlaid with slight confusion. Seemingly the normal state of that human, and a short explanation of quantum entanglement ship-to-ship communication. But that was not what Nyar wanted to know. She suspected the translator to be not accurate, even though she had been very proud of how she had made it, at least in the beginning. Thank you very much for the explanation on your ship-to-ship communication technology. I am afraid I have not understood how it ties into your interhuman communication. Could you please elaborate on how you communicate between humans outside the range of your voices? This time the overlay of confusion was so strong that it was everything that came back. I am sorry for having been too vague, and I will try to explain it from my point of view. Since your arrival and at this moment, I cannot measure signals of any kind coming from you or being transmitted to you. Judging from your position of representing all humans, and your current awareness, you are obviously still tied into the shared consciousness. This information I only want to know so I can ensure my earlier promise of no harm coming to you in my presence. My least desire is cutting you off from your collective because of my ignorance. More confusion, and the polite inquiry to elaborate. Using this indirect way of exchanging information was very tiring on her mind, and this meeting was on a good pace to outlast Nyar's previously longest. Carefully she put together more phrases, but her curiosity and slight frustration got the better of her for a split second. How does your hive mind work? She then inquisited bluntly, and too fast to stop herself. The human luckily did not appear to be disgusted from her directness, and even seemed to understand this question better. There was no confusion attached to the reply, and they flatly stated that humans were no hive mind, and this one was an independent individual. But that could not be. How could a being that tiny possess a nervous system complex enough to communicate intelligently, let alone create technology to traverse space? What then was the benefit of them being so many? With a thought she locked down the meeting room with a full-spectrum communication blockage field, a safety measure she had implemented for emergencies and not planned to actually use. Incredibly, she noted no change in the human. It truly was a contained unit, independent from a shared consciousness. Nyar was perplexed and again let slip a thought. The disk in her hands chirped, "Impossible, you are too small." This time she thought to hear some emotion from it, baffled incredulity. Ambassador Neil stood up instinctively, drawing herself to her full height. She was at least 2 hand widths above average height, adding her oftentimes unruly curly hair that might have even been 3. With difficulty she got back into a diplomatic mindset and asked, "There may be some misconceptions on both of our sides. Please help me understand the relationship between size and intelligence and how it regards to your perception of human biology." A full minute went by where the big solid black eyes just stared. Then the translator sprung into action to say nearly intelligible through even more distorted and louder noise, "Brain big, intelligence high." This was an exercise in frustration with these short and nearly pointless answers and questions. To top it off, the translator device seemed to be on a process of breaking down, if speech clarity was any indication. Neil pushed back the urge to begin pacing up and down the room to help her think better, and gave herself a couple breaths before saying, "I am sorry, but I do not understand your motivation in this current exchange, and I would suggest to ensure future relations that I return to my ship momentarily." "And how did you build your ship?" The voice was clear again, the distortion having returned to a minimum. "I did not build it. Did you build your coverings?" For a moment she looked down at the hard exterior of the suit's chest plate that housed the collapsible helmet and an ample source of air and power. Her whole body was covered in this segmented semi-flexible suit, as that was made to fit her exactly. It definitely was her suit, but she did not make it. The same could be said of the ship she had come in. It had been modified to transport only her. She had the hazy beginning of a conclusion. I did not build any of the equipment I have with me. She paused to take a breath. Did you build your ship yourself? What kind of question was that? How else was Nair supposed to travel through space? Her frustration already ran high because of the misunderstandings before. This was so very confusing, with the human clearly wearing protective apparel that fit their body and movements to seemingly optimal precision, and them claiming to not having built it. It obviously did not grow on a tree. Nair was completely at a loss, and she could not wrap her mind around how anything worked with those humans. Coupled with that was her whole body beginning to ache because she was standing polite for so long. Yes, I am the maker of my ship, she thought as a short answer. It even sounded wrong. Who else would make her ship? The prompt reply came overlaid with excitement, which she couldn't make sense of. The human now wanted to know if she had used her hands to make it. Nair nearly twitched. She did not think the inquiry from before could be outdone. And now came this. What an utterly nonsensical question. Yes, came in the clearest tone yet. Just so she could be absolutely sure, she added. Do you have machines that build ships? She saw more movement from it this time. It shifted, and then turned its head to look at her with the other pair of eyes, though it was the same scrutinizing glare. A machine. Cannot build. Now Neil could not stop herself from pacing any more. The alien being was huge and more massive than any land creature on Earth. If size truly equated intelligence, and it was not only sapient, but able to build a spaceship and a fully functioning, albeit seemingly limited, interspecies translator by hand, the latter one a mere 2 days within first hearing of humans, it must be exceptionally intelligent and skilled in all types of crafts. Neil did not know how the ship worked she was using. Someone else did. Well, there probably was no single person in the world that knew how all of its individual components operated in detail. So the humans actually were some type of hive mind in comparison. If this alien species had no complex machines, they had no computers. The implication was mind-boggling. She had millions of questions that went far beyond diplomatic purpose. Maybe the first step was to create some more understanding. The ambassador opened her hand that had unconsciously closed tight around the insignias she had taken off earlier. Carefully she straightened them, and laid them out on her forearm again. These insignias were designed by several humans together, and they are exactly the same, because they were built by a machine. The alien first shifted backwards, and then slumped down to support its upper body onto the larger arms. It moved its head down onto her eye level, and as close to the transparent wall as possible. Tell me more. You got them? I think so. Let me check the data integrity. An anonymous approximation of a face on the screen replied. Ambassador Neil unplugged the cable that had just connected the chest piece of her all-purpose pressure suit to the console she sat in front of. While leaning back, she took her hands up and naturally dug her fingers into the hair on the back of her head. There she played with the textured curly strands for a moment to relax. All good, I think. What are your instructions? Get as many from the reserve as you can put your hands on onto the main team. I want everyone and their mother to analyze the shit out of the audio and every word it said. And the translator? Her eyes fell on the disc-shaped device that somewhat looked out of place with its smooth, nearly organic exterior that was a soft matte beige being surrounded by shiny metals and polished plastics, every gradient between white and black. The communications room was filled with the finest tech, screens wherever she looked, computer racks to enhance the ship's mainframe, and several layers of redundant backups for any part of the comm system were squeezed in there. A narrow, free path to the door, and the floor-mounted swivel chair was actually all the space there was for a human. I've got it right here, but there is nothing I can tell you about it. No visible energy source. No measurable outgoing transmissions. Damn, not even any indication of how it works. I have pushed it through the wave box though, so get some eyes on that data. Okay then. How much time do we have? 2 hours, max. I may lie down in the meantime, but I doubt I can relax. Don't feel like eating much either. Just do your thing, and get back to me as quickly as you can, okay? I suggest resting nonetheless. See you in a bit. Bye, she replied, before ending the transmission by touching a certain area of the screen. Neil had only one point of contact, but she saw in her mind's eye how behind them were hundreds that would soon work tirelessly on sifting through whatever data could be extracted from the recordings and scans she provided. Wasn't that act, the offloading of work and distribution of experience and knowledge, an actual part of the definition of a hive mind? Shaking that thought, she tried to mentally sort through the last hour. That first meeting had ended with the alien requesting a break to rest. Her preparation came into play then. Neil was proud of that, because she had brought an actual mechanical clock with her, and had fetched it from the ship to explain time. Imagine explaining time, breaking down the rhythm of planetary movement, revolutions, rotation, day-night cycle, a concept that usually had to be taught to a small child, and here an alien being with possibly immeasurable intelligence had needed it explained. And then it had dictated the break to be 147 minutes. She got up to do more thinking, but that had to be accompanied by some good pacing, and there wasn't enough space in the communications room. So she migrated to the former central common room and lounge area that was slightly less chock-full of additional equipment. There was also a significantly higher probability of snack occurrence. Ambassador Neil. Incoming transmission. Quickly she went over to the large wall-mounted screen and tapped the glowing button on it. The 2 hours were nearly over, and she had become restless. I'm listening. It was of course her contact again. Hello, Ambassador Neil. I have a set of instructions to put together and utilize a device that will help you understand the output from the alien translator. Since there is not much time left, I suggest starting immediately. Suggestion accepted. Go ahead. Slot a blank multipurpose board into the printer and load up the plans I have transferred just now. Following those directions, she went to the matter printer and took a small, densely populated circuit board. She carefully pushed it into a holding clip that doubled as a data transfer port. On a small screen besides the printer, she then typed a sequence of buttons to load up and execute the blueprint she had gotten. Immediately the device went to work and began layering liquidized ceramics, polymers, and whatever metallic components the blueprint demanded onto and around the board. So what is this thing I'm fabricating? Neil asked without taking her eyes off it. We found the alien translator device to output speech in multiple layers simultaneously, with up to 40 lines spoken at the same time. Wait, so I understood only a fraction of what it said. That's insane. It did not sound scrambled together though. I was able to clearly hear short phrases. The loudest layer is the only one clearly decipherable by human ears. It is a very basic synopsis of each message. What did it fully say then? I suggest using the interpreter device going forward, but there is not enough time to go through the audio transcript. The difference in message length to the synopsis is significant in most cases. Of course, she glanced at the embedded clock on the printer's display. She would only have 3 more minutes. At least the printer head was already doing its last few twitches, depositing a finishing layer onto the 2 cable-bound pieces of equipment. Seconds later, it let off the audio signal for being done. So Neil grabbed what she recognized as an earpiece and a small flat rectangular thingamabob, both now shiny black after the hardening period. Mount the main unit to your suit in a place where it will best pick up the translator audio output. The earpiece was designed to fit your right ear. Be aware that there might be a noticeable time delay before you will hear the full message, depending on the information density. The interpreter was devised with the same no-emission standards as the rest of your equipment. Okay then, till the next break. Goodbye and good luck. A minute later, Ambassador Neil arrived back in the meeting room, the translator in hand, and the translator interpreter stuck to her chest plate. The flat wall on the far end was opaque, as it had been when she had come in the first time. She noticed that the room had changed. The walls were narrower, the ceiling was lower, or rather the floor higher, and the stool had been replaced with a proper chair that actually had a backrest. On it lay the clock she had originally put down onto the stool, but it still looked seemingly undisturbed. She left it in its place to remain standing as her anticipation ran high. The moment of truth came little later, when the barrier between the alien being and her turned translucent. At least, she was mentally prepared for the reveal of the massive sapient creature that again had its intense large eyes on her. It was in the prone position, and resting on its large pair of arms, which made it at least look somewhat relaxed. She did notice the alien translator device, feeling subtly different in her hand now. "Greetings again," the unfittingly thin voice of the translator chirped, and Neil held her breath until she could hear the synthetic voice through the earpiece. "Welcome back, representative of humans. I am joyful to see your return, and hope you have rested and recharged. I am sorry again about the need to instigate the break, but I am now ready to engage in more discourse." She was unable to fully suppress her smile. There was an inexplicably large amount of excitement swinging with the greeting of the human. There also was something new about them, Nyar and Anhep noticed. A dark object clung to their apparel, hanging on a thin wire that came from one of the audio-sensory inlets on their head. Nyar looked closely, but could not distinguish its purpose. So she thought of appropriate questions. "I do not want to overstep any bounds again in my curiosity, but I did notice that you have brought a new object with you. It has a strange and disharmonic shape, but it is very finely made and wonderful to view up close. Is this something you want to show me that is as interesting as the timekeeping machine? I still think that to be fascinating, and would be happy to learn more about the machine's human use." After sending her thoughts to the translator, it took far longer than usual for the human to answer. They had waited unmoving for a long moment before replying, and there again was a strong sensation of excitement with a mix of jubilance. The human explained the machine. It was a device that complemented Nyar's translator, since it did not speak in a way a human could understand properly. They had built it during the rest period, and now they were able to hear all of what she spoke. How wonderful, and also shameful. Nyar's translator had obviously not been made correctly, or maybe she had wrongly interpreted their audio communication abilities, and now they have had to fix it. She had nearly messed up this first contact meeting with the humans. Reflexively, Nyar clicked in frustration before tensing up. Clicking was impolite and decidedly undiplomatic, and she dearly hoped the human would be unable to sense it. Quickly she moved her thoughts to questions about the new machine to distract from her lapse. A sharp sub-bass snap that seemed to penetrate into her bones made Neil flinch in surprise. It had been barely audible, and she could not tell where it came from. There was no reaction from the being, and a moment later it felt like it could have been a hallucination altogether. Only after now straining her ears did she notice what was unconsciously bugging her, since she had stepped onto the ship. There was absolutely no noise besides her own, and when the translator did its thing. And even though she thought about it at the very moment, it still made her flinch another time from breaking her out of her thoughts when it spoke. "How did you build it so fast? It is wonderful that you could make up for the inadequacy of my translator, and that you are now able to better understand me. I am very interested in learning how you were able to swiftly design and build this machine in the short time span I had suggested for the break. Choosing to ignore that incident and thoughts from before, she began the explanation she had already mentally prepared. In my ship, I have a machine that is able to weave metals and plastics to create different building blocks that can be combined to form nearly any kind of small machine or device I may require for this meeting. I have sent the audio recording for analysis to my friends, like I said before, and they have designed this interpreter device so I would be able to understand you better. The machine then built it for me within 2 minutes. But I can see that you can build very fast as well. You have changed this room while I was gone. Shape is easy. Tell more of weaving machine. In her ear the interpreter expanded. This room is merely a surface I have made to encapsulate the specialized environment necessary for your well-being. Changing the internal size or general and detailed shape is an effort not worth mentioning. I am fascinated by the matter-weaving machine you have spoken of that is able to build this interpreter machine so fast, and may create other machines as well. How did you build it so it can contain the intellectual ability necessary to understand what it is building, and how do you teach it new things? Neil exhaled through pressed lips. These were complex questions, and it didn't even tell her how it could reshape a room possibly without the technological benefit of any machines, apparently even effortlessly. That was decidedly more interesting, and she had to stop herself from bombarding the alien with questions, though she definitely was at least communicating properly now, and pulling this diplomacy thing hard. The urge to move pressured her to fidget with her hands, but at least she was not walking side to side again. She had to keep this simple now. That would not be too difficult as she did not know the technical specifics about how the matter printer worked anyway. What was this human talking about? Using so many of those words where Nayer had not found any sense, and mixing them with each other into one long mess. Processor, motor-driven, computer-designed blueprint, data storage, touch screen, molecular fusing, standardized circuit board, polymers, ceramics, and they still went on and on. She had to stop them. I am truly sorry, but there are too many words I am unable to comprehend. We may revisit this topic later on, and for now, I would just like to know how humans have built the weaving machine. Embarrassment. Did she feel her own, or was that coming with the human's reply? They gave a simple, but still incomprehensible answer. The weaving machine was built by other machines, so behind the interpreter machine was a more complex and intelligent weaving machine, and behind that was an even more complex and intelligent building machine. She could not even imagine how the human had made the first machine, and now she learned of that. It was hard to hold herself back, so she formulated a very short question to not let anything else slip out. How did you build that? There was no emotion she could interpret over her own overbearing confusion. These building machines were made by even more machines. How? Was this an unending chain? What level of complexity could these machines reach? Nier's body ran hot just trying to wrap her mind around this insanity. Did you build anything? To clarify, she quickly added the words the human had used, with your own hands. The alien shifted and twitched almost more than Neil at the moment. The movement of the massive being that was only an eye height, because the floor behind the transparent wall was at least 10 meters lower, made her exceedingly uneasy on top of everything else. Well, no, I did not. Interpreter, apparel, weaving machine, ship, built nothing? There was no need to wait for the interpreter to engage. She quickly explained, all of these things are built by machines. They are much more precise and much better at making things than we are with our own hands and tools. But they are all based on our designs and ideas. And way back in the past, we did build the first machines ourselves. A long silence followed where the being lifted its gaze to seemingly stare down the corridor that ended in the docking tunnel behind which was her spaceship. Only after a few breathless seconds, it turned back to her. Impossible, The translator chirped with a good amount of background noise, so she waited for the delay to pass to hear the full message. You state that you are unable to build the interpreter machine, or the weaving machine, or the builder machine. But complexity can only come from more complexity, the same way an intelligence cannot create a greater intelligence. You claim to have built impossibly complex machines with your hands, that then built the machines you claim to be unable to build due to their complexity. This is a sequence that cannot be. Truly, I am impressed and fascinated by the machines and objects you have displayed, and could not recreate them if I tried the hardest. I could only deduct that humans must have come later than the machines then, and you must originate from machines like every other object you have displayed. Neil's mind was tumbling through these words, and she could not find a calm spot in the whirlwind of thoughts that was going on in her mind right now. Did she not stand in a spaceship capable of interstellar travel, holding a device that translated whatever inaudible way of alien communication into her language? Were these not machines? Very complex ones, even? Okay, firstly, we humans definitely don't come from machines. Secondly, you have made this. She held up and shook the translator, ignoring that the act might impact its ability to make her understandable. And this is a mightily complex machine. It's a device that changes my language into yours, and yours into mine. How did you make this with your less complex hands? It began talking while she was still waving it. The translator is simple. I have shaped and built the translator to internally vibrate from my thoughts and transform these vibrations through the connected material into movement of the outer skin, which creates the type of atmospheric pressure waves that humans are able to distinguish with their audio-sensory organs. It is an unmoving, simple, non-intelligent object. What? This is crazy. What about your ship, then? The ship is simple, was the same nonsensical reply. It was shortly followed by the expanded version from the interpreter. My ship encapsulates an atmosphere and kinetic environment suitable for my well-being. I have shaped and built it to have many different translators to transform my thoughts into other forms of energy and movement. It is as well unmoving, simple, and non-intelligent. Neil's eyes bulged from that reveal. She managed to suppress any further undiplomatic gestures of surprise and disbelief while still basically vibrating internally. Watching her language, she asked with only a slight tint of exasperation, "Your technology is based on forms and shapes? If I dented the translator, will it then stop working or what?" "Yes," the translator chirped. "And the same goes for your ship?" "Yes." Neil gestured wildly around herself. The momentary levels of disbelief would probably suffice on their own to make a considerable change in shape to this spaceship by going through the roof. But how is your ship powered? How does it move through space without engines? How do you make all this work? The silence that followed made her think she had overdone it. The large creature just stared unmoving, and there was no way to tell if it was in the process of saying something or refusing to talk, at least until she heard the translator speak the least intelligible words yet, in a cascade of babble and distortion through which she could only guess to have understood shape. After that, she waited for the interpreter to jump in and tell her what in the 9 circles of hell that was supposed to explain. But nothing came. From the frustration, she had automatically begun pacing, but she forced herself to stop. Still, she dug her fingers into her hair and softly clawed her scalp. Maybe this was not a good topic. Maybe that would be something for the engineers to pine over instead of her. She was here to establish relations, to exchange basic information wrapped in pleasantries, and lay the groundwork for future cooperation. They had at least something in common, as Nyar felt the barely contained frustration in the reply from the human that very much mirrored her own. They said their interpreter machine had been unable to understand what Nyar had just explained about the mathematical principles that dictated the form of her ship, and with that allowed her to travel through space. but they emphasized that her spaceship was indeed very complex, and that humans would be unable to recreate it. They apologized for their language, for some reason, and stated the desire to rather talk about simpler things. So they asked what material she used to build her ship. That truly would be something simpler to talk about, so Nyar obliged. It also helped to remove herself from thinking more about the circle of impossibility that were human machines. She put together the human words to explain, but quickly noticed that they were missing a lot of words to properly describe the knitting process and the building blocks. Maybe showing it to explain the process, like they had shown her the timekeeping machine, was the right way to go. Nyar thought of a shape that would be appealing to humans, but all she had seen so far were mixtures of blocky and round, and nothing distinctly stood out. She decided on a simple cube with the same volume of the human and the same bright white color of their coverings. She moved the sufficient amount of building blocks along her forearms, and then began fusing them together piece by piece with her fingers, moving them rapidly so the point of contact would not harden prematurely. It did not take her long to finish the cube, and its precision was to her satisfaction. A wave of wonderment and surprise hit her a good moment before the human had expressed a single word. They seemed to be an inexplicable level of impressed by the cube she just had created. This is a mere shell, a hollow shape without any purpose, and I have only built it to demonstrate the building process, as I am unable to properly express it in your language. The emotions did not cease in the slightest. The human said to be amazed nonetheless, and could now imagine how her ship had been built. They also stated again how humans were unable to do such a feat, even going further with explaining that if they would raise 10,000s of them, and had the knowledge of how it worked, they would still be unable to build a spaceship by hand. 10,000s, multiples of 10,000. She knew that there were many humans, but they could not be that many. This new piece of information ripped her away from the talk about the building process. The humans had not been considered a threat, because they were loudly screeching around space 2 sectors over with only, what Nyar had previously assumed, a few hundred ships. Could there be so many more of them than of her species? Her thoughts slipped. How many are you? The human answered instantly. Around 22.5 billion. Why? Click. The humans were billions, tens of billions, a number that was so staggeringly high, Nyarninthep could not imagine those to live on 10 planets. No, 100 planets. How could a sapient species become so numerous? Did they reproduce so quickly? Was this a species of fast breeders that had become intelligent by some fluke? Because those were not supposed to be smart, never mind capable of space travel. This was not how this meeting was supposed to go. Nyar's body had tensed up since that reveal. These humans could be massively dangerous with their immense numbers alone, and they decidedly had a technological edge as well. Now she was glad she had so far been unable to disclose much information about her species. What she had shared so far was enough of a risk. There was nothing left to do but break this meeting off and share what she had learnt to warn everyone. She had always thought that being afraid of the fast breeders was reserved to her non-sapient ancestors, but here she was, scared by numbers. I hereby stop this meeting because I desire to depart immediately. Please leave my ship and return to your own in short order, as I must remove the room you currently occupy. Unsurprisingly, she felt great confusion from the human when they had fully heard her words from their interpreter machine, and made the attempt to find out more about her reasoning. Please tell me why, Neil desperately pleaded again at the unmoving, now mute alien being. What had she done wrong? It was clearly a reaction to the information on the population count of humans. But why would that cause this sudden change in behavior? I was just going well. She had gotten to see the amazing building abilities of the alien. After that demonstration, she was convinced that it would be able to build whatever it wanted, using only its hands. The translator restated its last message. Please leave. She walked right up to the transparent barrier to be as close to the sapient alien creature as possible, looking right into two of its black eyes. After breathing deep, she said, "Okay, I will leave. But first I want to tell you this. I came here with the promise of peace. And I don't know why our population count has turned you away. You must understand, we may be many, but right here and right now, we act as one. Far and wide we have been looking for intelligent life and other sapient species. And there is nothing else we desire from whomever we may stumble upon, but friendship. If you have found yourself to trust me the slightest bit, I ask of you to extend this trust to all humans, and accept that our sincerest wish is for harmony between our species." Neil gave it a minute of unbroken eye contact before she conceded. There would be more chances to establish contact with them, and she did not want to cause a diplomatic incident by overstaying her welcome, so she turned around to set down the translator and pick up the mechanical clock that was still resting on the chair. Without looking back, she began walking through the hallway towards her ship. Her eyes easily followed the rounded walls and soft curves, running unbroken right up to the point where the human-made docking tunnel connected. It was quite the contrast in materials, but the metallic ring joined seamlessly with the matte organic-looking surface. There was not the slightest gap visible between them, and they formed an airtight seal without the usual locking mechanisms. She was about to step over that connection when she heard the childlike voice of the translator speak out to her, "Stop." Apparently there was a volume level minimum for the interpreter, because it did not do its thing and remained silent. Ambassador Neil turned and walked back into the meeting chamber. "I am apologetic. The past made me fear." This time she was close enough and got to hear. "I am sorry for the rash reaction, as this is a development I had not anticipated. I thought the humans to be a localized hive species with a shared intellect and a therefore limited population count. Now I know that none of my assumptions are true. It is heavily ingrained in my biology to be exceptionally apprehensive towards small creatures in great numbers, as they had been the predators that preyed on the ancestors of my species. It is difficult to suppress the instinct to avoid becoming overwhelmed at all costs, and I seemingly was unprepared to handle an incident such as this. I know that my reaction was extreme, and with little comprehensible reason, but I ask for reprieve nonetheless." The creature, 6 times larger than a human, somehow looked small at that moment. Or was that merely a fluke of imagination? Neil did not know what to think about the explanation. How would she have reacted if she had met a sapient species that was wolf-like, or looked like xenomorphs? Would she have stood above her instinctual monkey brain? Though for her, it was clear that this incident was merely a blunder on the way to a better understanding, and without having to think about it, she replied, "I am glad you have thought it over, and am thankful for your explanation. I now understand why you reacted the way you did, and I see no reason not to forgive you and move on." Neil had underscored her words by nodding, and to her utter surprise, the broad and flat head of the alien nodded in return. Before she could express her astonishment, the translator chirped, "All humans? On one planet? I wish to leave this lamentable event in the past as well, and am grateful for your understanding and forgiveness. If I am not overstepping bounds, I would like to know how you have made a home for this great number of humans on your planet Earth, and how are you providing so many with biological resources? Would that not exhaust your ecosystem? Or are you using spaceborne habitats to expand the former, and your machines to help with the latter?" Neil had not been able to relax yet, and hearing the staggering population numbers the human was talking about absolutely did not help. For a start, apparently their home planet Earth could sustain the near incredible number of 14 billion humans, supported by technology and machines, spaceships, and habitats on otherwise lifeless planets, and moons in their system gave home to nearly 1 billion more. And then came the next surprise. They had colonized 25 planets with a habitable biosphere outside their home system, where all the rest lived. She had assumed the meaning of colonizing to include creating an ecological environment that would naturally support humans. But would that not utterly destroy those worlds if they already had an ecosphere? Maybe she had misunderstood? Her curiosity keeping her short, she put together and sent the question, the 25 planets outside your home system, how did you choose them for colonization? And how many more have you found that would align with your criteria? And the human explained how their main focus lay on finding planets with advanced plant life. They also did not mind finding fauna, since any animal they have discovered so far was immeasurably stupid. Then, they added that had found around 150 more candidates for colonization. Now Nyar's instincts went right back to telling her that the humans were a threat. They were actively searching out alive planets to then bring thousands upon thousands of humans there to tear down that life, and then replace it with whatever would benefit them. She knew that planets the humans were looking for were numerous, but that would surely not protect them from being depleted at some point. And maybe these were then even the same planets Nyar's species would seek out for their offspring that had reached independence. I would like to know how the colonization and selection process works, and where the candidate planets are that you have found. They began explaining about scout ships they would send to scope out star systems, going out from their own home system in the center of the search radius. But the process of establishing a settlement sounded like nothing Nyar would have assumed. Apparently, they would first create a small foothold and carefully research each world before fully committing. There was some more information after that, but it was words about technology she did not understand. The important part was, it did not sound like they would conquer and subjugate those live planets like she had assumed. Carefully, she worded her next question. She did want to remain diplomatic. So you do not destroy the ecosystems you convert? Confusion, but then quickly followed by shame? They stated to do their best to highly limit the changes to worlds they would choose to colonize, since they had nearly caused an ecological collapse of their own world when they had still been a single-planet species. They called this stance the maxim of exoplanet conservation, and said it would be held dearly by all humans. She was astonished from what the human had told her. Their own world had been damaged by them so much in the past that they now made an effort not to harm any other. Though it was not hard to picture how a species that could grow so numerous would become a threat to the planet it developed on. She briefly imagined a swarm of millions of humans trampling through rich vegetation, devouring everything